you ever thought of music as a game? A game you might not know even if you have been playing an instrument for many years. Is music just a sequence of notes, or is it a way to communicate with the universe? Are you living it as a complicated game of chess, or as an endless game, a continuous discovery? I have invested a lot of time, experimentation and passion in making this video, probing the depths of music theory, linking chords to constellations, and exploring connections between music, biology, literature, and psychology. And today I want to take you with me on this journey. Music is a game, creative, intellectual, physical, and emotional. For many years of my life, I've tried to win at this game, and even though I've had many satisfactions, I always felt like I was playing the wrong match. In fact, you can look at music in two different ways. As if it were a chess match, or a sport in which in the end someone loses and someone else wins, fame, success and recognition, or as something that goes to the root of your desire to play, something more akin to the spontaneous play of children who imagine themselves in an unknown world and by inventing a parallel reality, end up discovering themselves and the world around them. In the first type of game, you write your own compositions, record and publish them to play live in front of an audience. Certainly to enjoy the music together, but also to assert your talent, to be recognized in your field, possibly at an international level, to show what you are capable of compared to others, to demonstrate the uniqueness of your talent and to make music a dignified profession. And all of this is absolutely right. Moreover, in this type of game, you study your instrument a lot. This fantastic object. And it's actually beautiful, but I must say that there is a risk of spending your entire life exploring it, leaving the real world outside the door. So I changed the game and chose one in which everyone can win, because there are no real winners and no specific talent is required, just imagination, curiosity, and the desire to discover oneself and the world, just like an 8-year-old child. Thus, I opened the music room to let in everything that crossed my mind: astronomy, biology, literature, graphic representations, musical theories, and much more. It's a symbolic game of exploring life and the cosmos, of which music is just my personal means of transportation. Nothing particularly esoteric, just a game of knowledge. Today I've decided to play my new game, and this video represents my new beginning, which is also the start of a new musical composition. Like in a serial, I will add a new fragment in each video, thus the composition will grow bit by bit and will be listenable as a single piece without breaks. An ever-lengthening track which I hope will accompany me for the next years of my life. To start, I have decided to create a series of descending notes starting from A flat and ending on D. Why these two notes? Because the sounds are symmetrically divided around these two notes, representing the axis of symmetry, a bit like the north and south of music. This can be clearly seen by placing a mirror on a piano, but also by arranging them on a clock. However, I still had to figure out how to fill the space between the highest and the lowest notes. With which notes? I needed something special. So I went in search of significant notes, notes that contained within them the seed of everything else, almost like a cell, perhaps the one with which our self began. Indeed, the first moment in which we were truly ourselves was when we were a single microscopic cell, a zygote, which contained the very first copy of our DNA, or all the information that would then transform into what we have become, for better or worse. So all that was left for me to do was to find a musical zygote. I thought of looking for the minimum number of notes that would contain, in the most compact way possible, the greatest amount of information, and I found a truly special set of notes. A unique chord, because it contains all the possible distances between all the musical notes in just 5 notes. All the distances except one, the central distance, precisely the distance that lies between D and A flat, or the North Pole and the South Pole, the two notes with which I had decided to start my composition. It's beautiful to name things, and I chose to call this group of notes Sigma, because there is a magnificent star system in the constellation of Orion, right near the Horsehead Nebula, called Sigma Orionis, and it's formed by 5 main stars that rotate on themselves, just like the 5 notes of this chord. So my zygote chord will be called Sigma. I then decided to concatenate a series of sigma chords in such a way that the last note of one chord became the first of the next, and thus I descended from A flat to D. Then I overdubbed some tracks of 12-string guitar. And finally, I played a chord with lights and shadows. A bit major and a bit minor, and I really liked the result, and I hope you will like it too. However, the fact that the sigma chord is missing just that single central distance, the one between D and A flat, was fundamental to me. In the past, this combination of sounds, known as the triton, was considered diabolus in musica, with diabolus meaning that which divides in ancient Greek, more a thing or the human attitude of dividing than an actual person. However, I believe that the triton, so named because it consists of 2 notes 3 tones apart, is instead a symbolum, meaning something that brings back to unity what was previously divided. In ancient Greece, a symbolum was a coin that was broken into 2 parts, which were given to 2 different families. When a member or a friend of the first family needed to be recognized from someone from the second family, they presented their half, and the fact that the 2 pieces matched was a guarantee of that person's origin, like an identification token. The physical object assumed an importance that went beyond the material it was made of, and became a symbol. Just like everything I'm talking about. In fact, my own musical composition is actually a symbolic game, something that tries to put back together the pieces of which I myself am made. And so, at the end of that cascade of notes, I wanted to put a series of tritons, symbols of the unity that ascend from D to A flat. But for me, the triton represents more. It's the union of opposites, a Tao of music, a bit like a fish with wings. Among the most natural scales, we have the major and minor scales. But there are also 2 other scales, mirror images of each other, that represent an extremization of these 2, as if they were the most major of the major scales and the most minor of the minor scales. These 2 extremes are called the Lydian and the Locrian scales. And they symbolize for me the sky and the earth, but without loading these scales with a positive or negative sign. I simply believe they are 2 dimensions within which we humans move and that we must bring back to unity. What is significant for me is that these 2 scales, opposite and mirror images of each other, are a triton apart and share only 2 sounds, precisely the triton distance that represents the union of opposites, the synthesis, what is common to the 2 extremes. These 2 scales can also be represented as a spiral with 2 arms, somewhat similar to our galaxy, the Milky Way, and so I have named this spiral the Locridian galaxy. If the triton represents the union of opposites, the sigma chord is everything else, everything that can be major or minor, and then the triton is just like us, mysterious living beings, suspended halfway in the exploration of earth and sky and their infinite nuances. That's why I titled this first musical game Sky, Earth and Life. Moreover, the triton emerges from the sigma chord precisely because of its absence, just as happens in the drawing of the Italian psychologist Gaetano Canizza, in which a white triangle is seen even though no one has drawn it. This optical illusion is for me a metaphor for the cosmos, where the black part represents the nature of the universe, its matter, while the white part is its cause. It's the question to which the universe answers. And just as one of the key statements of Gestalt psychology, the movement to which Canizza belonged, affirms, by observing with an overall view, we can grasp the fact that the universe does not consist only of the sum of its individual parts, but that there is something more, something unwritten, that gives it meaning and eludes its individual elements. It's a bit like when, listening more carefully to my cascade of notes, I observed something rather unexpected. This series of notes has a special characteristic. In their descent, they raise the overall sound of the music, the harmony. In practice, while these notes descend, they raise the chords. Indeed, the notes are arranged as if they were on a staircase, where to go from one floor to another, one must ascend or descend 12 white and black steps. However, each floor is essentially the same as the other, due to a sort of auditory illusion called octave. And so we can also simplify things by arranging the 12 notes on a clock that repeats these 12 steps, always returning to the starting point. Well, the sigma chord has the characteristic of extending only over 11 steps. So when I concatenate more than one, I descend 11 steps along the staircase, but I ascend 1 hour on the clock. Therefore, I raise by descending. So I decided to record ascending lines with the electric bass, double bass, and some guitars. Lines in contrast with the descending movement of the notes I had recorded earlier. In music, this opposing motion is called contrary motion. And it's a bit like if a meteorite with the sigma chord on board had fallen on a new planet, bringing with it zygote cells from which a new, unknown form of musical life will arise. It's an oxymoron, a fall that rises, a sunset that dawns. Once again is the union of opposites, like a symbol that reassembles itself. In this game of mirror symmetries, I felt like Alice through the looking glass, and so I continued my journey in the same direction. The chord following the meteorite crash included the triton and some major and minor notes, derived from the Lydian and Locrian scales. It's a hybrid chord, somewhat mysterious. So I improvised with the electric guitar over that chord using minor notes ascending and major notes descending, as if to direct the earth towards the sky and the sky towards the earth, in search of unity. Finally, to complete the sound environment, I needed to dirty the sound and make it more organic, less mathematical. So I recorded the noise of stones and bark to shape the Locrian sound of the earth, and manipulated some digital sounds to form a more abstract, metaphysical sound, I would say Lydian. In the end, all this translated into a musical fragment lasting less than 2 minutes. A sequence of notes perhaps a little bit anonymous, which I hope, however, can produce in you who followed my journey a bit of the pleasure and immense fun I experienced in this exploration. So here is my first musical game titled Sky, Earth and Life. From piece to piece, I will always add a new fragment to this same composition, which will grow little by little, and if you wish, you will be able to listen to it without interruption on various digital platforms. Or you might start playing too, because actually this game has a name. Have you ever read The Glass Bead Game? Hermann Hesse received the Nobel Prize for writing it. It was his last novel, and I believe that following this line of exploration, he would have told me that I am a beginner in his bead game, a game of creative connections between music, biology, astronomy, literature, psychology, and every other possible field of art and human ingenuity. In the book, the game is never really spelled out, but it's described in an indirect way. I, on the other hand, have attempted to give this game a graphical form through a map and a series of symbols with a spirit that unites the Aristotelian deductive approach through some categories inspired by those of the great philosopher, with the more inductive and artistic nature of Hermann Hesse. I would be immensely happy to see and hear music of this kind made by other people, not necessarily musicians, even through comments on this same video. And so I leave in the description the possibility to freely download all my material. Notes, diagrams, audio files, and scores that perhaps can inspire someone to manipulate and rework them. And remember, no special talent is required to play, just imagination and curiosity. The final part on the piano is an idea I will develop in the next episode. I have already pictured it as a butterfly. I don't know how it will be called, and I don't even know where it will want to fly. But if you want to board on my imaginative musical ship to follow its journey, you're welcome. Ciao!